All right, for reaction on the latest salvo by the United States, I'm joined by Professor John Stremlau. He's Department of International Relations Head at the School of Social Sciences at Wits University. Good afternoon, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. You know, to be quite frank, I believe many expected that South Africa's position to not ceremonially hand over to a junior US official would have had consequences. But what becomes the question is whether President Donald Trump is exercising powers he has in barring a participating member state from attending the G20. Does he have those powers?
Yes, he does, and formally he could do that, but legitimately, can he get away with it given the customs of the G and the protocols of the G20? Don't forget that the turnout for the G20 summit in Johannesburg last week was absolutely breathtaking in its scope, and even Argentina, which is allied with Trump and the Trump administration, had to cave in. And I just think that that now that there is going to be a quiet diplomacy that will take place during the course of the next year, and we'll see what happens. But it's a waste of time, and Trump is really a fly in the ointment here for moving forward with the G20 agenda that was sort of miraculously cobbled together and by the Sherpas, 19 of them, minus the U.S.
I want us to delve deeper into the quiet diplomacy that we could probably witness with their presidency, but first to take you back to your position that Donald Trump does have the powers to bar a participating member state. Where does he derive those powers from? Because we're not diplomats, of course, but with the elementary understanding of the founding principles or how the G20 is constituted, we understood that all member states are actually custodians. And there's a precedent-setting case of 2014, where I believe it was Australia before the G20 was elevated to head of state level. At that point, Australia had attempted to bar Russia for the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Now, in that instance, it was the G20 members that came out and said it must never be forgotten that here you cannot have one that holds the presidency unilaterally deciding who should be barred. You don't change the shape or form of G20. We are all custodians. So if we have that precedent-setting case, where does he derive the power from now?
Well, that's the question of legitimacy and the protocols that prevail in the G20. But that's the G20 is an informal discussion group without an institutional backing, and that's why South Africa has worked so hard in the past year to move it forward and to get the developing countries more of a voice in the G20. But don't forget, we are in a world of sovereign states, and the evolution was advanced to a more globalist approach by the South African Constitution. But I think that Cyril Ramaphosa has walked the line of being sensitive to what is the sovereign prerogatives of the United States, that is to say, boycotting the 2025 session summit. But you saw the great turnout, and so I'm confident that this will be resolved. You know, Trump is the bad guy in the room. Cyril Ramaphosa is the good guy, and I think that he's got the sympathy of the other members of the G20 on his side, a majority of them, and the international organizations, which he's trying to encourage to reform itself, to make it more attuned to the challenges that we now face in the world. But it's a slow process, and it's not going to be resolved easily.
Now, when you say President Trump is possibly the bad guy in the room and President Cyril Ramaphosa may be the good guy, some would probably agree with you, perhaps, but there's also the question around who wields more power in this instance, because most of the nations on the G20 come from a very bruising and exhausting trade relations negotiations process with the United States. is President Trump not perhaps betting on polarizing them based on what has just happened not so long ago? That here you might have those that might not want to stand up for South Africa, even if on principle they would feel South Africa deserves to be at the G20 in America, but nevertheless there might be very few that openly stand up for South Africa, given where they just come from with the trade negotiations. Could he be betting on that?
You know, this is a really an interesting subject that you're raising, and I don't know whether I can give a simple answer. But it is the fact that the domestic politics still reigns supreme for all nations, and that the Trump administration is in trouble domestically with politically. And the summit will occur in Miami after the congressional elections. And the Republicans could get soundly beaten in the November elections, and therefore they would have a majority in the Congress. But this is only speculation. We don't know what the outcome will be, but we do know that Donald Trump is the oldest president in the history of the country, and he is now in his first year, and it's caused enormous ruction in the international community. But he is going to leave in 2028 or 2029 or January, and so it's taking the long view. And I think Cyril Ramaphosa and the South Africans took the long view of evolving international relations, multilateral organizations, and it's not for a regional hegemon, be it Putin, who at least had the good sense not to show up because he's an indictee of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And so, you know, but Trump doesn't have that. Even Trump doesn't have Putin's good sense when he exercises that. I mean, in diplomatic sense. And it is a credit to South Africa that he did not show, and it will be a credit to the South Africa if Trump backs down, as he did with the handover at the DERCO on Monday.
If anything, these will be interesting times with the United States presidency. Professor, as always, thank you very much for your insights on the program. That's Professor John Stremlau. He's Departmental Head of International Relations at the School of Social Sciences at Wits University.